I built a special room at the top of my house for my Edgar Allan Poe books. I call it my Ravenloft. Welcome to Boards and Swords. I'm Chris Renshaw. Now, while this review probably would have worked better in May, it's much more suited to games as we're leading up to Halloween, assuming that this video comes out by then. Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. I'm assuming you have to put that in there, but Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft is one of the more recent setting books for D&D 5th edition, describing the realm, obviously, of Ravenloft, which is this area that's all these different domains of dread, they call them, that are connected through these mists that surround each of these domains. Each one has its own kind of unique horrors within, and they're all ruled by their own kind of dark lord. If you've seen the show Lucifer, each one's kind of like their own hell loop, where the Dark Lord kind of repeats the events that kind of led to them going down their dark, horrible path, or it's related to that kind of, that environment. And if you haven't seen Lucifer, then each of these domains is still like a hell loop. I imagine you get the concept. I thought this book was really cool, but either way, let's check out some 1-star reviews I found about this book. 1 star. Ugh. I have to admit, when this book was first announced, although I wasn't surprised by it, this was also kind of my reaction as well. Curse of Strahd is set in Barovia, one of the popular domains in the Domains of Dread of Ravenloft, and it's a very popular adventure in 5th edition, not all of D&D in general. However, I had assumed that Ravenloft was just kind of the area around Strahd, like that whole area of Barovia was just, that was all Ravenloft was. But no, it turns out that is just one of the domains of Dread. In fact, there are like 16 other different domains listed in this book, and even provides just some kind of one-beat notes of the other domains. But those other 17 are fully detailed inside this book as to what their Dark Lord is, what set them on this path, and what kinds of different settings can you find in there, what are the different towns, what are the people like in there, etc., etc. Classic and boring. I enjoy classics, but this one was boring and not as dark and weird as I was hoping it would be. Not as dark and weird. This book has like every genre of horror in it that you could possibly think of. There's the Carnival, a domain that travels through other lands and even into other domains. Plus, it's a carnival, so it's already creepy on just that baseline alone. And in Dementlu, there's always a party, but if you deceive the Duchess and she finds out, she disintegrates you on the spot. You just poof, instantly ash. You can fight off the dead in Harakir, witness unnatural constructs and creations in Lamortia, or keep from falling asleep and being in a never-ending nightmare in Lakath. So there's all types of different things in here that if you want to tell a horror story, there's a domain that really fits that type of story. Poor quality for Wizards. They must have been going down the slide when they made this one. Not quite sure what you mean going down the slide. Does anybody knows what that term means? Because slides are really fun in my book. I really enjoy going down slides. I don't know what going down the slide means, but getting back to the book here, it would be easy for them to just detail out Ravenloft alone, just detailing out all those things. That could have been this book on its own, and granted, it is a large portion of this, but there's also a whole chapter on how to run a horror-themed game. Things like making sure you don't go too overboard with the horror, making sure how you pace out your adventure to get that right suspense feeling, and tips and tricks on how to create that kind of atmosphere to kind of build a horror game. At the end of that chapter, there's even a sample adventure that's a completely separate domain only for use in that adventure. That's just a haunted house adventure, complete with seances and ghosts and all sorts of various things. If you just want to like step your foot into that kind of horror atmosphere and go for something that's a little bit more stereotypical. Pure garbage. Enough said. This feels like the appropriate time to show off the alternate cover artwork for this book. And this is amazing. I don't know what you're talking about. So the person on the front here, apparently this is the monster hunter Ez Davenir. I hope I'm saying that right. In the background, you can see all sorts of these kind of like baddies, you know, various like there's a werewolf, there's some skeletons and ghouls in there. And then, of course, overall in the background, I'm assuming this is probably Strahd kind of looming down, looking overall. However, this person here looks like a pirate that I would not want to trifle with. Although I don't know of any pirates that I would want to trifle with. Anyway, this you cannot call this book garbage in any sense of the word. It is gorgeous. And I mean, even the regular edition looks still pretty frightening as well. Sound does not work. I would like to get this item for a gift, but I cannot get the sound to work. If your book's making sounds, you've probably got a cursed copy, and you probably should return that for a full refund or wherever you ended up buying it from. However, while we're talking about like other senses and stuff, does anybody know the incantations that wizards use to get their books to smell so distinctively? Like every time I've opened this book, I'm like, oh yeah, that's a D&D book right there. Like if I were blindfolded and 3 different RPG books were put in front of me, I could easily find the D&D book just by like picking them up and smelling them one by one. Bottom line, this is probably my favorite setting book that Wizards has come out with, and that's saying a lot because Ravnica was one of my favorite settings in Magic, so that book was a really big and important for me for a long time. But this has become my favorite just in the amount of the lore that's in here is the right amount of lore that I wasn't getting overly bogged down with this individual continent and that individual continent. There was enough and detailed in here that kind of kept me intrigued. And then after being horribly underwhelmed by the Tasha's Cauldron of Everything book, it was really refreshing to see a book that actually had some meat on its bones and some detailed information. That I highly recommend you go check out this book. If you're a GM, you should definitely pick up this as just another arrow in your quiver for coming up with your own D&D games, specifically when we're getting into this holiday time period. Now, make sure you hit that subscribe button and like on social media, or else the miss will come and claim you as well. Thanks for watching.